Good morning from our global headquarters in New York. I'm Menace Crenny alongside Danny Berger. Welcome to Bloomberg Brief. Let's set your agenda.
The global stock rally propels higher. Soft landing narrative drives momentum into the countdown to Jackson Hole. Passing the torch, President Biden kicks off the Democratic National Convention, endorsing VP Harris. Republican nominee Trump focuses on his economic vision. And a message to Hamas: say yes to the ceasefire deal. Secretary Blinken travels onward to Egypt. Good morning, Manus.
Danny, good morning. Day 8 of the U.S. equity rally, $3 trillion added globally. We're in for day 9 of an equity rally. So there is no buyer's remorse on the dip whatsoever. Goldman Sachs say the pain trade is actually for higher stocks. If you're not on this juggernaut, according to Rubner and the team over there, you're on a losing trade. They indeed put a line in the sand. They said the end of August, you're going to get these buybacks, and that's going to propel us higher. I like what Laurie Calvasina had to say yesterday on surveillance. Proceed cautiously, but proceed and with caution. In other words, it's a double lock. The oil market, by the way, NVIDIA, never far from our minds or our hearts, down 0.6%. But that's a break of trend. 6 days. 6 days of when it added 24% in value. It breathes this morning. The oil market gives 0.6% back. Couple of things here. A, there's narrative around a ceasefire from Blinken telling Hamas accept the deal. And the bearish dominance. You're looking at China's oil demand falling 8% in July. A 9% drop in steel production this year. The narrative around China is building to the downside. Bonds. The risk is you get a hawkish lean. That's the tail risk from Jackson Hole, that there's a hawkish lean from Powell, a less aggressive cutting cycle than the market has currently priced in. Bank of America says you want to trade 350 on the downside, 425 on the upside. So it's that kind of bandwidth with a lean to the long. Danny, good morning.
Good morning, Manus. And to be fair, we have had some of the hawks finally capitulate. One of the most recent one was Kashkari yesterday morning, saying that the time is appropriate to cut. But even within that was a reason not to buy bonds, Manus. He goes on to say that I'll probably in the camp of, hey, let's take a more measured approach because we don't know where our destination is going to be. We keep hearing this of Fed policymakers saying it looks like now is the time to cut, but we need to be judicious and measured in that approach.
And if you put those two together, one is a pivot by Kashkari, but then daily talking about a gradualist approach. So I think that this is where the tail risk, as we go towards, this is what I said to you yesterday, the tail risk is a slightly more hawkish cut than perhaps the narrative that we've been hoping for. Pop the earpiece back in, and we'll all be able to hear. We'll all be able to hear what's going on in just a moment.
I like this. You're like, I'm done with Fed speak. I don't want to hear any more of this. No, but it is this weird thing, right, where you still have more than 25 basis points priced into the bond market. So the question can still be asked, are equities and bonds saying something different, that there still is this momentum in bond markets that maybe we'll get 50 basis points of cut somewhere, whereas equities went from growth scare to growth euphoria. Exactly. We're, 1% away from all-time highs?
Yeah, I mean, and plus, you're at all-time high on the equal weight. And that's the other thing just to bear in mind.
Yeah, much breadth.
There is so much breadth. The one final thought I put is this. It was a great conversation. It was the ADP chief economist, and she said, look, put the brakes on the fear-mongering. Define what is normal. Define what is normal, our new normal in a post-COVID world where you're going to cut rates. Where is the new neutral rate? What do we need to wrap our hands around in terms of an unemployment rate that is more natural?
Yeah, but of course, recession, no recession. It's binary, and you get
session,
a market.
no session.
There is indeed a session, I promise you. Market session, 8:30 a.m. this morning. In the meantime, it is 5 a.m. We're getting through these markets, but we also have politics to cover. Over in Chicago, the Democratic National Convention kicked off with President Biden touting Vice President Kamala Harris, calling his party to rally behind her.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. But she'll be a president our children can look up to. She'll be a president respected by world leaders because she already is. She'll be a president we can all be proud of. And she will be a historic president who puts her stamp on America's future.
Meanwhile, Republican nominee Donald Trump takes a jab at his opponent, saying her plan to aid first-time homebuyers is, quote, a big mistake, but then, of course, said that he himself would be interested in supporting homebuyers as well. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn, who joins us from Washington, D.C. So, Vonnie, day one of the DNC, what were the takeaways?
Well, it was electrifying, really, for those in the audience. Danny, I must say there was a cavalcade of speakers before Joe Biden, from Dr. Jill Biden to his daughter Ashley to senators from his home state, Chris Coons, Raphael Warnock. Hillary Clinton made comments, and they were all basically getting more and more emotional as the night went on and thanking Joe Biden. Chris Coons, for example, turning that famous "Let's Go Joe" slogan into "We Love Joe" and "Thank you, Joe," and the whole audience and the whole DNC delegates sort of took up this chant. Then Biden came to the stage and you saw him dabbing some tears away, and he did allow himself some emotional moments and some comments. You know, I love the job, but I love my country more, for example. And he ended with, "America, I gave my best to you." But he did get very quickly into the pragmatic campaigning Joe Biden, and that's what you heard there, where he drew Kamala Harris's presence to all of the positive things that his administration had achieved.
Go after the undecided, even if it takes a little bit of tears to get you there. Vonnie, good to see you. Tell me this, what did we learn from the Trump campaign? I mean, I like what Danny said, which is Kamala Harris is talking about $25,000 for first-time buyers, etc., which was lambasted by Trump. But then, of course, as she said, you know, he's thinking about it himself. What did we learn yesterday from the Trump campaign?
I think we learned that nothing is off the table, right, Manus, particularly when it comes to anything that Kamala Harris has actually suggested might happen. He lambasted that prospect. He said that, you know, most people say it would be inflationary and it would actually cause housing to have problems among first-time home buyers. But then when we asked him, Bloomberg News asked him, would he consider helping those who want to get on the housing ladder, he said, yeah, I might do that. He didn't specify how. So, you know, we are looking for details from these candidates, from, you know, Kamala Harris to Donald Trump, on what exactly their plans would be. It doesn't appear that Donald Trump has many plans regarding the housing market yet, or regarding the Fed, except that he likes to talk to Fed chairs. He said that he had jawboned, was the way he put it, with Fed Chair Jerome Powell, and we know that he doesn't want Jerome Powell to serve another term as Fed Chair when his current term runs out in 2026. But when we asked him who would he like in that position, he also said, well, it's way too early to say. So he's equivocating to some extent and maybe pausing for time. But we are going to hear more, because he is talking to anybody and everybody, giving news conferences, interviews, and obviously he will be in Michigan later today. He's going to North Carolina as well, and he'll finish on Thursday in Arizona, all critical swing states.
Well, to quote the former president himself, apparently he has a better instinct in many cases than people at the Federal Reserve or the chairman. Vonnie, good to see you. Vonnie Quinn, keeping the lights on in Washington overnight. Lindsay Newman of GZero Media weighs in on the election race, writing this. Harris now leads Trump in a head-to-head polling across a number of key swing states. In the latest polling, she is now more trusted to handle the economy than Trump. The first time Democrats have led on this key metric throughout the 2024 campaign. Lindsay joins us now. Lindsay, good to see you. So the narrative is this: it's prescription caps, it's money for first-time buyers, etc. It's playing very much to the middle class. The question would be, the accusation back is this is interventionist economic policy. I just wonder, do these kind of policy narratives embolden her in the swing states?
Thanks for having me on again. Since the last time I was on, nearly 1 month has passed since Harris has entered this race, and she continues to outperform expectations. If we think back to earlier this summer, even just a month ago, the real narrative that Democrats were facing was, would President Biden step out of the race? If so, who would step in? And if it was Vice President Kamala Harris, would she be able to be that torchbearer for Biden after pretty middling favorability ratings herself for many, many years? And now, as the Democratic National Convention gets underway, Vonnie said it was electrifying in the audience there. Democrats have really turned the page, and it's showing, as you say, as you reflect in that quote that I have, for Kamala Harris in head-to-head polling, in swing state polling on this all-important issue. She laid out her economic plan last Friday where she talked about an opportunity economy. We hear this morning she's talking about 28% corporate tax rates. But the messaging is breaking through, the messaging of looking to the future, moving forward. And we see that in fundraising halls. And we see that overnight at the DNC. And the DNC will continue to be a big test for her and her campaign. Conventions tend to be energizing, electrifying moments, but it will be a real glimpse into whether Harris can hold together the party around these fault line issues like Israel-Gaza, and whether she can finish strong over the last couple of months in the way that she has started this campaign.
Still, though, I mean, one of the things I was maybe telling was they were 30 minutes delayed, and officials said that it was because of the raucous applause that they had to delay by 30 minutes. So that might be telling of what the atmosphere was there. But Lindsay, as she lays out more policy and fills in the gaps, it does leave her more vulnerable to criticism. And we have seen that in the various economic policies laid out, from housing to price gouging and now increasing the corporate tax. What do you make of the rollout of policy and the details that she is giving or isn't giving?
You know, what's really interesting about that, Danny, so the Democrats, as is standard practice, they released their party platform on Sunday, and they did not update the party platform for the change in leadership at the top of the ticket, right? This is a party platform that they released that had been approved on July 16th before Biden stepped out of the race. So what this tells us, really, it lays bare something fundamental about what's going on here in this campaign. This is about the energy that Harris has brought to the campaign, but this is not really it's not yet clear that this is the Harris Democrats, right? Like the Reagan Republicans. This is about something bigger. This is about Democrats having their eye on ambitions for November of defeating Trump at all costs. And we will, of course, see Kamala lay out policy as we did last Friday. We have to expect more of that with the debates coming up, with more of the direct, she's going to be in more direct contravention, in more direct interaction with Trump over the last couple of months post-Labor Day. But this is really about atmospherics for the Democrats, about turning the page, moving forward. And we're seeing a very different tone than what we saw. We even saw a glimpse of it last night in Biden's speech, where he essentially gave the convention speech he would have given if he was accepting the nomination, highlighting his greatest hits and also talking about the threats to democracy. That's not what we're hearing from Harris and her campaign.
Let's just reflect back on something that Danny touched on, the corporate tax policy. This is just one piece of what one could say is quite a tight piece of policy. She's backing the continuation of a narrative from Biden, which is to raise corporation tax to 28%, more than the United Kingdom. And that's saying something. Trump has or flown the kite that he'd like to get it to 15%, and obviously reduced taxes in the previous administration. Where does that 28% mandate win? Where does that win her votes?
Yeah, Manis, I think it's earpiece day over here as well. What I would say is, it's an interesting piece of news that she's decided to come out today and back Biden's policy decision to do 28% when we see, as you say, that Trump is moving in the opposite direction. This is a very significant point of policy differentiation that she is apparently comfortable with backing. And, we will see whether it turns out to be a decision that gains her that wider umbrella of votes that she needs, casting a wider net over the Democratic Party that she needs, because she is focusing in on this narrative of honing in on supporting the middle class, making sure housing, making sure college is more affordable, making sure those pocketbook issues really are heard for the middle class, and trying to differentiate with President Trump, who is focusing in on the corporates and the wealthy individuals.
Hey, Lindsay, we really appreciate your time this morning. Lindsay Newman of GZero Media, subsidiary of Eurasia Group. Thank you so much. Okay, Manis, let's get to some of the other top trending stories on the terminal this morning. Apple will make its most expensive iPhone Pro and Pro Max models in India for the first time this year. Its key manufacturing partner in Asia, Foxconn, will begin assembling the devices within weeks of their global launch this fall.
Residential units around Beijing and Shenzhen have been cut in price by around 20 to 30% in recent months. That's thanks to local governments in China dialing back on intervention, causing a race for cash among developers and spreading a price war across China's new home market.
Health authorities are concerned that Mpox may be spreading before people show any symptoms. The typically milder cousin of smallpox has started to spread much more quickly than it used to. There are about 18,000 recorded cases now.
Coming up on the show, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken heads to Egypt and Qatar for the next steps in the ceasefire discussions.
And later in this hour, good news is good news again. We're going to catch up with Kathryn Rooney Vera from Stonex as the equity winning streak continues as we approach the equity market session.
It's still in play, but you can't predict what is going to. So far, Israel says they can work it out, they're prepared, but I was told Hamas was now backing off. It remains to be seen. We're going to keep pushing.
President Biden speaking to reporters in Chicago on the status of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire talks. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken now heads to Egypt and Qatar. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Paul Wallace. Paul, the headline we got out of this was Netanyahu has accepted a ceasefire deal, and now Blinken is saying it's up to Hamas to say yes. What do we actually understand about this ceasefire deal and how close we might be to it?
Hi, Danny. The Americans are certainly sounding more optimistic in public. And what they said is that Netanyahu has agreed not to a deal specifically, but to a proposal. It's a little bit unclear whether the Americans are talking about something they put forward back in May or something that's new in the past few days. But either way, they and the Israelis are now putting the onus on Hamas and saying it's up to Hamas to say yes or no to an agreement that would see fighting at least paused, if not permanently ended, and hostages released, as well as Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. However, there is still a lot of skepticism within both Israel and among people who watch Hamas closely, a skepticism that the sides have managed to bridge their divides, and some of the key issues are the same issues that have dogged these talks for months now. Hamas wants the war to be over whenever there's a ceasefire agreed to. Israel insists that a ceasefire is just that by definition, and that it can continue the war if and when it chooses, because it's intent on destroying Hamas as a military and governing organization. There are also details that still need to be hashed out, like how many hostages are released in the first phase of any ceasefire. So they're definitely still sticking points.
Well, let's just talk a little bit more about that, Paul. Good morning to you. Blinken talks about a fierce urgency in progressing towards a truce and a hostage release. And there are a number of major sticking points. One is about the corridors and whether Israel sustains and maintains troops in some of these more technical corridors bridging into Egypt, North and South Gaza. But there's also, you know, what it is that Israel wants. They want the ability to call time on this ceasefire and restart, let's say, a conflict if they feel that they want to finish Hamas off. And this is perhaps one of the biggest stumbling blocks, as we understand.
Exactly. For all that Hamas has been hammered by Israel since it began its air and ground offensive after October the 7th, the group still has, by Israeli estimates, thousands of fighters in the Gaza Strip, and they're still able to mount attacks on Israeli troops in Israel itself.
OK, Paul, thank you so much for keeping us appraised. Paul Wallace, tracking Antony Blinken's next steps across the Middle East towards a ceasefire deal. Coming up, a look at the other main headlines from around the world, including the missing passengers of a super yacht off the coast of Sicily. Context matters on Bloomberg. It is Bloomberg Brief, reunited. Manus Granny and Danny Berger in New York. Front pages, and these are some of the headlines from around the world. We kick off with a pretty tragic story. The UK tech tycoon Mike Lynch is missing after the yacht sinks off Sicilian coast. One person confirmed dead. Lynch, once referred to as the British Bill Gates, and Morgan Stanley International Chair Jonathan Bloomer are among 6 people missing.
Really terrifying story. Okay, next up, the Financial Times has this on their front pages, that U.S. regulators are likely to challenge Couche-Tard's proposed takeover of 7-Eleven. The concern's basically that a deal would increase prices for consumers. We've heard this political message for some time and damage the labor market. There have been similar snags, as we know, between the deal of Kroger and Albertsons that the FTC is looking to block.
And finally, the Journal. Well, everybody's got it, but we'll go with the Journal. Bronfman makes a $4.3 billion bid for the control of Paramount Global. You thought this story had gone to bed. No, it hasn't. It's back. $1.75 billion for Sherry Redstone's National Amusements. Further investment in Paramount, including $1.5 billion to reduce the debt. I love this story. It's just like every week you get another. You don't.
I thought it would go. I thought it was done. I thought we were done with it. And it just like
over.
You know, rises back from the grave.
This is Succession. This is actually Succession live. On a slightly more serious note, it's what does Bronfman offer to Sherry Redstone? What's he got to do to convince her to really rip up the script with the Ellison family, and what's he going to put into the company?
Well, the Paramount shareholders might like it better because it doesn't dilute them as much. Yep. But you do have a pretty sweet offer from Skydance. They have very deep pockets, and they also have a $400 million breakup fee that Bronfman would need to pay.
Which he says he'll include the $400 million, as you do, $400 million to cover the breakup deal with a rival. Sweet deal.
From our global headquarters in New York, welcome to Bloomberg Brief. I'm Danny Berger alongside Manus Cranny. Let's set your agenda.
That global stock rally propels higher as the soft landing narrative for the U.S. drives momentum in the countdown to Jackson Hole. Passing the torch, President Biden kicks off the Democratic National Convention endorsing VP Harris. Republican nominee Trump focuses on his economic vision. And a message to Hamas. Say yes to the ceasefire deal. Secretary Blinken travels onward to Egypt to build a coalition of the willing. Danny, good morning. There is no buyer's remorse in that stock market.
There isn't, and it's just remarkable the breadth that we're seeing in terms of this rally. The equal-weighted S&P 500 hit an all-time new high yesterday. Everything from big tech to small caps joined in the rally. So far, we are on track to have a 9th day of a rally. If we're able to do that, that's the longest winning streak for U.S. equities since 2004. Just to give you an idea of the momentum behind it, the bond market, on the other hand, is not going anywhere this morning. Your 10-year yield at 3.86%. We did have some flattening yesterday because the hawks are capitulating, Kashkari being the most recent of them, saying maybe it is time to cut. He most recently said that he would wait until the end of the year. But the important thing is they're talking about a gradual approach. Kashkari certainly is, Daly certainly is. So that's why we got some of the flattening in the 2-year yield coming in yesterday. Meanwhile, Brent crude holds on to its losses of yesterday. It was down some nearly 2.5%, down 0.5% this morning, $77.20 barrels a cent. Manus, you talked about the economic reasons behind this in China. And of course, it's also geopolitical with Blinken telling Hamas to accept a ceasefire deal, that Israel has accepted a proposal for a ceasefire deal.
Yeah, I mean, those commodities have all been shaken over the past couple of weeks, Danny, as the equity market, volatility in the equity market plummeting from that, that moment of, some say, fantasy at 65 on the VIX back to, I'm just looking at it this morning, sub 15. So the equity market is telling you soft landing anonymous. The bond market, I still say the bond market, the proclivity in the bond market is to err on the side of lower yield for a whole host of reasons. Disinflation, geopolitics, and those are the two alphas. And still, you've got various people saying trade, 350 to 425, but from the long side.
But there still is this remarkable nature to a 10-year yield that's still below 4%. Below 4%, despite the fact the economy is not falling off a cliff, and we have deficits to worry about next year. Perhaps some of that will be assuaged by Kamala Harris proposing a higher corporate tax. I'm not quite certain about that and how certain people are taking some of her proposals, whether they're serious or not. But there is still that deficit overhanging, and we don't yet care about it. And again, it's a 10-year yield below 4% still.
Neither of those candidates at the moment prepare to deal with the narrative around the deficit, but it may be the bond market that comes back to slap them, whoever is in that White House, in terms of the narrative. I like what the ADP chief economist said yesterday, Neela Richardson. Put the brakes on all this fear-mongering as you go towards Jackson Hole. Define what the new economy is and what the new normal is.
Yeah, I think it's clear that the short volatility event, at least for now, has gone away. But this is the thing. We're kind of searching for the new normal. We're searching through the trend. And you tend to get a lot of whipsawing as you do there. But right now, that chop is only one way, and it is upwards.
Yep, I think Mary Daly sets the table very well about what gradualism is. I think it's a word that we're going to hear a little bit more of in this narrative from Jackson Hole. Politics, it's one of the reasons why this bond market is under 4%, as you say. In Chicago, the Democratic National Convention kicked off with President Biden touting Vice President Kamala Harris, calling his party to rally behind her.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. That she'll be a president our children can look up to. She'll be a president respected by world leaders because she already is. She'll be a president we can all be proud of. And she will be a historic president who puts her stamp on America's future.
Meanwhile, the Republican nominee Donald Trump takes a jab at his opponent, saying her plan to aid first-time home buyers is, quote, a big mistake. Vonnie Quinn is with us from Washington. Vonnie, good to see you. I mean, we've touched on this, which is, you know, lambasting or lampooning Harris's campaign for money for first-time buyers, and then, yeah, that's something that he might think about. So talk us through this pomp, this ceremony. I'm looking at the DNC website this morning. I'm not seeing a policy tab yet. I'm hopeful.
Well, Manus, they have other things on their mind right now, this week at least anyway. They just want to get the excitement going, to keep the excitement that you saw in the DNC theatre tonight, to keep that going throughout the week and to get this bump in the polls that you typically see, at least since the year 2000 for Democrats, at least 2.1 percentage points, to maybe make hay while the sun shines, if you like. And tonight was the kickoff of that. I say tonight, it was Monday night. It was the culmination of all of the speakers with then the President, Joe Biden. He gave a very something for everybody type speech. It was emotional at the beginning. It was emotive. He talked about the administration's positives. He tied Kamala Harris to everything good that had come from this particular administration. He also attacked Donald Trump in, very vociferous ways. He said that he had absolutely killed the border bill. It was a bipartisan border bill. In that sense, he was getting ahead of some criticisms that Kamala Harris is bound to see over the next 10 weeks and has already been seeing. And of course, he also gave a little bit of nostalgia type talk to all of those supporters in the audience who were basically helpless. They were shouting, "We love Joe" and "Thank you, Joe," in place of the "Let's go, Joe" that had been the campaign slogan from 4 years ago. He said to them and to the world, America, I gave you everything. And, he also had the line, "I love my job, but I love my country more." And that was essentially the theme of night one, which was "We the people." Protecting democracy was one of the pillars of what Joe Biden had to say tonight.
Bonnie, typically when you have a national convention from either party, the opposition party doesn't do a lot. They don't do a lot of media because the thought is that there'll be so much focus on the convention that it hoovers up all the air in the room. That hasn't been the tactic of the Trump campaign, going to various swing states, doing events. What does counter-programming look like right now from the Trump campaign?
Frenetic, I would say, Danny, and the style of campaigning that you talk about, well, it seems to be old style campaigning at this point. On the Republican side, you have Donald Trump going to swing states, talking to reporters, giving news conferences, trying to get in everybody's face in order to take some of the oxygen from the Democrats. On the Democrat side, you also have some novelty instances. For example, you have 200 influencers invited and given stage time, some of them, and also given studios and any kind of tools they need to work with in order to get the message out to the young vote. So very different kind of an election this time round than we've seen in the past. But you mentioned the counter-programming in Michigan. Donald Trump will give a campaign Tuesday, another key swing state. And then Wednesday is going to be in North Carolina, where Kamala Harris, according to the latest polls, has a slight edge, as she does in several swing states at the moment. Not statistically important, but directionally very important for the Democrats. And then he'll be in Arizona Thursday. So there's going to be a lot of counter-programming and a lot of rhetoric as well. You mentioned earlier, Manas, about his conversation with our Bloomberg News staff about housing and how, he was lampooning Kamala Harris's $25,000 subsidy for first-time home buyers and saying that, nobody thinks that's a good idea, even economists. Well, at the same time, he said that he might be open to something like that when pressed by Bloomberg News. He also talked about jawboning with the Federal Reserve chair previously and said, there's nothing wrong with that. He doesn't have to take my advice. But as Danny pointed out earlier, he did say he does have particularly good instincts when it comes to monetary policy.
Hey, Vonnie, we really appreciate your time this morning. That is Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn in Washington. If you're just joining us this morning, futures are pointing higher. It would be the 9th consecutive day of rallying for the S&P 500 if it can do it, the longest winning streak since 2005. Joining us now to talk markets is Kathryn Rooney Vera, Chief Market Strategist at Stonex. Kathryn, really great to see you this morning. So not only has the rally continued, equal-weighted S&P 500 also just hit an all-time high yesterday. Has anything changed since last 2 weeks ago? Little mini crisis? Is something different, or are we right back to where we were?
Not much changed, Danny, during the market meltdown. We saw a labor market come out a little softer, and not much has changed since the market rebounded and really melted up since then. What has changed? Nothing. So I think that tells us a couple things. One, the markets are highly levered to whatever economic data comes out. So we're all attuned to every ECO, high frequency data, that comes out at 8:30 or at 10 o'clock. And I think that's important for the markets to take into consideration, that volatility is pervasive and it's going to remain. And volatility isn't just to the downside, it's also to the upside. So I think it makes sense in times of market surging to protect those positions. That's something I've been saying for an extended period of time. And I think it makes sense now when the VIX has collapsed back down to sub 15. Going into the end of the year, we see a lot of events that could be moving the markets, including elections and ECO data. And I really think that that gold is going to continue to perform very well. I still like equally weighted S&P. It's been one of my top performing calls this year. But I do think it makes sense to put on protected hedges.
Kathryn, just on that note, good morning to you. Yeah, you're right. Gold's had a cracking run, 2,500. I knew that trade would come good one day. Long time ago.
That gold under your bed, man.
Stacked under the bed. That's why the bed is raised up. On a slightly more serious note, we've got 10-year government bond yields at 3.87 this morning. And this is what Danny and I were chatting about, is the equity market is flying higher. There's the elixir of life in the equity market of a soft landing and margins and earnings that are supportive. But the bond market is telling us something different at 387. It's sub 4%. The bond market is more worried about the landing than the equity market, isn't it?
Well, that's exactly the case. And the truth is, when you look at the past 7 episodes over the recent decades, when the Fed does start to cut rates, that's when the rubber hits the road. That's when we see how the strength of the economy is. In this ensuing 12 months after the first Fed cut, 43%, according to our Stonex estimates, of those 7 episodes over monetary policy history, we've seen recession ensue. That's not a small percentage. So I do think that that investors should be contemplating the possibility that we could see a rollover in the U.S. economy. And I think the risks are underestimated currently in the equity markets. And the bond markets, I think, are taking that more into consideration. So look, the S&P, for example, if you look at the past 7 episodes that I talk about in monetary policy history, if we don't enter a recession, the S&P rockets on average 19% higher. But if we do enter a recession, of course, we're talking double-digit debt to the downside. So the message that I have is to be prepared for that ensuing volatility. Don't assume that the current trend is going to be semi-permanent in nature. The Fed is likely to cut, I think, 25 basis points in September, and then go on a quarterly pace at 25 basis points. Likely, the terminal rate is going to be a lot higher than what the markets are anticipating if we don't go into recession. I think that's the only way the Fed really can attempt to hit that 2% target.
What about sort of the other risk, not necessarily recession, but that the economy is strong and they don't cut 25 basis points consecutively for the next meetings? Kathryn, how much is your equity call, your more bullish equity call, contingent on continuation of cuts from the Fed?
Well, I think it's contingent on economic growth. I mean, we saw this last year. The markets are anticipating a lot of Fed cuts, and it didn't happen, of course. But it didn't matter because the economy grew very, very robustly, and it continues to grow robustly. So I think there's a bipolar fat tail risks in nature here, Danny, and you make a good point. I think you could see an overheating of the economy, and effectively that's kind of where we're at. I mean, potential growth in the U.S. is 1.8%. We're growing at 2.8%, so that's inherently inflationary. We have an output gap that's positive, inherently inflationary. So I do think that we're unlikely to hit the 2% target without recession. So really, I think that we're going to see inflation sticky above 2%, probably 2.5% without recession. And the Fed only cuts one time, 25 basis points per quarter over the course of 2025. So we get about 100 basis points in total Fed cuts, in my view, in this cycle.
I love that phrase, a bipolar fat tail risk. Written it down. It's embedded. It's embedded in my mind. Kathryn, thank you, Kathryn Rooney there, Kathryn Rooney Vera, I should say, of Stonex. Coming up in the show with Danny and myself, Alaska Air and Hawaiian Air. They're a step closer to finalising that merger. More on the deal. We've got all the details. Bloomberg Brief. I'm Manus Graney alongside Danny Berger in New York. Now, it's a $2 billion merger between Alaska Air and Hawaiian Air. It is one step closer to actually happening. The DOJ decided not to challenge it. Sid Phillip is with us. He leads our global aviation coverage. Sid, this is an interesting twist, you know, given this administration's proclivity to be slightly anti-merger. So Alaska Air, Hawaiian Air, the merits of the deal, what gets it over the line to the next regulator?
Yeah, so morning. So for the deal, it's actually sort of a good thing because they're one step closer to closing this, and the Department of Transportation is the only sort of hurdle that's left in order for the deal to go through, and that's a major departure for this administration, which has previously blocked deals like the JetBlue Spirit merger, as well as they've made JetBlue unwrap their partnership with American Airlines. So this is sort of contra to the previous steps that the administration's taken, and this will sort of give the combined entity about 50% of the Hawaii market, and it will sort of open, that's sort of $8 billion route, and so that is a sort of significant share of revenue, and in terms of being able to capture that market.
Well, I think
so it's a fairly significant
deal.
deal.
If I can jump in, because, you know, as both you and Manus so well noted, they had blocked that JetBlue Spirit airline merger. Do we need to be rethinking about the entirety of the airline industry and the ability to get mergers through if this one looks likely to be allowed?
It'll be an interesting perspective. I mean, it's still early days, and we still need to see what really happens with the whole transaction. But yes, it does bode well for future transactions potentially. I mean, at the same time, Hawaii is slightly different in terms of being able to sort of get a deal through, because a lot of the airports that both JetBlue, both Hawaiian and Alaska fly to aren't slot constrained, and so they don't really have the sort of same limitations that the other airports do.
It depends whether, you know, if Kamala Harris is president, does she take the same approach as Biden? I mean, different people have talked about their approach. Will she pursue such an antitrust agenda? But then Biden was trying to pursue the progressives when he was coming to power. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia. They're never far from a few dollars to spend. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is in exploratory talks, we understand, with Boeing over starting a cargo airline. So the competition is really set to heat up in the Gulf. This is what carried many of those major airlines around the world through the pandemic, isn't it?
Yeah, so air cargo was the bright spot for the airline industry during the pandemic. And Saudi Arabia is really at the crossroads of traffic between Asia and Europe, and Asia and Africa and Europe. So they are looking to sort of get a piece of that pie. I mean, at the moment, Qatar Airways and Dubai-based Emirates are the sort of dominant players in the region. And Saudi Arabia is looking to challenge that. And so they're in talks with both Boeing and Airbus, as well as lessors, to potentially get aircraft like the 777 and the 350, the freighters, and so that they can sort of fly volumes of cargo around the world and basically challenge what Qatar Airways and Emirates are doing.
Never a dull moment in the airline industry. Sid, we appreciate it. Bloomberg, Sid Phillip. All right, from airlines to retail earnings, we've already got quite a few. Today we get another one. It's home improvement giant Lowe's reports before the bell. Let's get over to Bloomberg's Dasha Afanasieva on this. Dasha, I mean, it was a head scratcher with Home Depot because when they reported, it was this idea that everyone's deferring their big purchase items around the home, and yet the shares rallied afterwards. How does that set the stage for Lowe's?
Yeah, it was a funny thing because I think there was this optimism that there would be interest rate cuts and then eventually, volumes would grow at these retailers. But Lowe's, like Home Depot, is expecting a decline in sales. Same-store sales are projected to fall 4.4% in the quarter. And I think we'll also be looking at the outlook, which, of course, Home Depot cut. And back to that enthusiasm and optimism over interest rate cuts, it could actually be misguided because there would be quite a delay and a question mark over how long those lower borrowing costs would then filter through to consumers renovating their houses in order to sell their homes. And that's, I think, the question also is this deferred. Home Depot put this positive spin on it because the idea of the deferred spend, the implication is that it's not that the people don't have money to spend. There's a degree to which they have the money to spend, but they're waiting until things are cheaper. So there's this kind of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and we'll see if that comes to pass.
Yeah, well, certainly the bargain hunters turned up at Walmart and some of the others. The question is, when those rate cuts come, just how furious will the, I suppose, the velocity of that housing market turn over? Dasha, thank you very much. We keep our eyes down. Stocks up nearly 9% for the Dasha Afanasieva on the look ahead for Lowe's. This is State of Play on markets. We're flat at the moment, but you got to say the equal weight, Danny, I think we both touched on this, is at an all-time high. Day 8 of the US rally and $3 trillion in value added back. Go stocks.
It's your Bloomberg Brief. Danny Berger and Manus Cranny in New York. Okay, let's get you set up for your trading day on this Tuesday. Lowe's is going to be reporting before the bell, and then more earnings of an economic bend. Toll Brothers will be out with results after the market close. And then on to politics. It's day 2 of the DNC, where former President Barack Obama will be speaking today. Manus.
Danny, tech and media are the power movers this morning. Paramount, we've touched on this. Edgar Brofman coming in with a $4.3 billion bid for taking control of Paramount Global. Will Shari Redstone shred the deal with her other cohorts? AMD extending its gain. They're agreeing to buy the server maker ZT Systems. It's a cash deal and stock transaction valued at $4.9 billion. Stock has bid 1.4%. Palo Alto up 2.25% this morning. They're giving an upbeat forecast, and you got it, boosting the buyback.
And meanwhile, this equity market, Manus, looks to put in another 9th consecutive day of gains. If it can do so, it would be the longest winning streak since 2004. This just out from HSBC, Max Kettner and the team saying that they expect continued outperformance of risky assets, even with a part reversal of recently benign inflation readings. The reason, Manus, is because we focused back to growth, and the growth figures have been coming in stronger, just the data in the past week.
Yeah, and if you look at, it's the same kind of narrative as we had. I mean, Max was full bull when he was here. You were on surveillance. He was so bullish last Friday. It was like he couldn't get any more extreme in their positioning. Also, Goldman Sachs are saying, look, the pain trade on US stocks is higher. And that is for them the momentum. And your tail risk, the fat tail risk is what? Jackson Hole?
Yeah, well, Morgan Stanley said something similar. We've only loaded 50% back up from where we were on those losses, which continues to suggest the pain trade is higher. So we'll see if Powell and co. deliver in the next few days.